everybody, today we're going to be talking about Victoria 3, or I guess more in particular, we're going to be talking about why Victoria 3 did not succeed as much as it should have. Victoria 3 was a game that launched at a very good time, that launched with a high pedigree, that launched for a company with a very devoted player base, and despite that, it has not managed to maintain much of a player base, and in fact, many people have sworn off the game entirely. Why is that? That's what we're going to be talking in this video. Why am I going to be talking about that? Because anytime I'm not making videos and anytime I'm not streaming, what am I doing? I'm playing these sorts of games. I'm playing strategy games. I'm playing grand strategy games, I'm playing Forex games. I'm playing any of this sort of stuff. That's how I managed to rack up hundreds of hours on every single title that I talk about. Victoria 3 is no exception. I used to run multiplayer games for this game. I used to mod it a lot, and I just don't think that the game is as good as it should have been. And that's a big thing. I don't think this is a terrible game. I don't think this is an unplayable game. It does maintain still a decent enough community for a more niche game like this, but I really think it should have been better. And that's something important. This game really should have been better. I don't really like being the pessimistic dude who only makes negative videos, but that's kind of what I'm good at, really, in a way. I like to make videos that I get to point out the flaws in games, because that's one thing that I'm good at. We're all good at one thing in life, right? And I'm good at kind of playing lots of games in my life and then kind of figuring out flaws in these sorts of games, things that could have been improved on. Now, before I go any further, what I do want to note is that 2 years ago, a week ago, I don't know why I said 2 years. The game came out 2 years ago. For the 2-week anniversary of the game, I made this document, and I was originally going to just make a video on it, but I kept getting anxiety because videos like this are really niche, and they're for a product that really doesn't have a wide audience. And videos where I just sort of critique those games don't really have a wide audience either. So I always kind of get anxiety, and I think to myself, who would want to watch anything like this, right? And I sort of put it down, and I think, yeah, this is not going to go well. But every time I do manage to work through that and put out these sorts of videos, I get at the very least a couple thousand views, which means that there are people out there watching them. And I do thank you guys for doing that, because you know what, it does help me continue to make more and more of these sorts of videos. So what is then Victoria 3? Victoria 3, I think, is described by the developers. They call it a nation garden game. And by that, what I mean is you basically plant all the ideas of what you're going to do into the game, and then you just sort of let the game run, and you hope that the nation that you're gardening works well. I don't really know a better way to put it. In other words, what you're doing is you're doing capitalism. You want to make your GDP go as high as you can. You want to employ your population, get them off the farms, because this is the industrial age. It works from 1836 to 1936. We want to get all these people who only work 6 months a year. I don't know if that's actually true, by the way. I think it might be 6 or 8 months a year. That is actually, okay, another thing I actually hate about these sorts of videos when I watch other people do them. Other people don't really seem to care whether or not they're right. And me, if I make a small mistake in my video and someone points it out, I think to myself, why do I even bother? Like, if I'm not going to be totally right about everything, why do I even bother? And that's why it can take me a long time to make these videos, because I can get like 30-40 minutes into recording it, and then I think to myself, I was totally wrong about that. That's weird. And then like I'll literally cut it off and be like, I can't possibly, like, this, it was 8 instead of 7. Like, I was totally wrong about that. Large tangent there, but let's go on here. The general idea in this game is to extract all the raw resources out of the ground and then use them to build products. That's the general idea. And you make your GDP go up and up and up. And the products that you're building get more and more complicated as you work through the tech tree. Originally, you might just be making wood tools, then iron tools, and steel tools, then railways. Then you might be getting steel railways. Then you might be getting electricity. Then you might be making cars and telephones, blah, 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 blah. Do you guys get the idea? It also has a little bit of politics and changing your laws and doing that sort of stuff. That's the general idea of this game. So it was a niche game, but it did have a very large audience, or at the very least it should have. So as I wrote this document a week ago for the 2-year anniversary of the game, which I'll explain a bit later why I wanted to do it for the 2-year anniversary of the game, we're going to kind of be reading through this document and whether or not I still agree with my arguments, because sometimes I'll have an opinion and then later on I come back and I think I don't like that opinion. So I thought it would be funny to just sort of read through this document and think, you know, do I still think I'm right about all this? So why I don't think Victoria 3 succeeded as much as it should should have. This will go into way too much detail and be way too nerdy for anyone to possibly enjoy. With that said, please enjoy this video, like, and subscribe. Saying this benefits me greatly. As I do explain every time, and I'll do it briefly here, saying like and subscribe does help a lot. It improves the video considerably, so just do that. And this is just kind of how the YouTube game is played, so please don't get annoyed at that. Victoria 3 had a very weak release, which is probably the biggest issue with the game. It had a very weak release, and all they've done is spent the last 2 years trying to fix the game, but I'll get into that later. Paradox games are notable for having weak releases that then get supported later on by DLC to flesh out the game. Paradox games are things like Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings, Hearts of Iron, so if you get an idea, these games tend to suck on release. Victoria 3 was no exception, with a release that lacked content, replayability, things to do, creativity, and most importantly, any factor that made you want to come back and try to play through the game again. The game can be tedious and slow and tedious, and also every country you play through kind of ends up playing the same, unfortunately. You get resources, you turn those resources into goods, you make your GDP go up. At the end of the day, once you played through it 2 or 3 times, you really don't see the need to go back. All the different countries kind of play the same. They're getting a bit better at it, but they kind of play the same, and the game is just really not that replayable or interesting to keep going back through. I'll talk about what exactly made it a weak release in great detail later, but for now I want to focus on the empirical evidence that the game had a weak release. There's certain things we can look at and compare to show irrefutably that the player base at large is just not enjoying Victoria 3. Now I'm going to do this because some people will disagree and say, no, the release was fine, or the release was fun, or oh, some people enjoyed. But I think when you look at the stats, you can show that, no, that's not true. None of what I would just use as a counter argument was true. The release of the game was quite weak, and I want to talk about why it was weak, but first we need to establish that yes, it was irrefutably a weak release. When we look at a timeline of Paradox releases, we can see that there was already exasperation from the community, as the player base had already experienced many content-light releases in a row, with one of them being abandoned by Paradox before it could even get fleshed out by a DLC. So all Paradox games tend to have very bad releases. For the most part, the first 2 years is kind of spent beta testing the game, adding content, reworking things. Imperator Rome was a game that Paradox abandoned. Now, when you put a good $40 into a game that kind of sucks, from Paradox, you have the idea that eventually it might not suck. And when they abandon a game before it stops sucking, Imperator Rome wasn't that bad once they got it there, but they abandoned it anyway. Once they abandon a game, you kind of feel like you wasted your money. Do you get the idea? Okay, so already the community didn't like that every release sucked, and when one product gets abandoned after releasing, it kind of destroys the trust from the community. Worse yet, there were many Paradox games sharing a niche with the Victoria 3, whether or not they wanted to admit it, that were still releasing new content. Now, the Victoria 3 developers seem to think that a country management game, a country building game, is like a unique niche that only they're doing, and that the other games aren't really competing with them, but they very much are. And the games that they were competing with were doing what they were doing in a more fun way, and were still releasing content. So when people were asked if they want to play EU4 or Victoria 3, people chose largely, screw it, let's just continue to play EU4. Players were asked to either play Players were asked to either play Victoria 3 or an already fleshed out Paradox game, and the choice became clear. So let's look at the timeline of Paradox developed releases, and you can see exactly why Victoria 3 was timed so poorly. We go over releases that released and are still being updated, and I will show you that Victoria 3 had a very large advantage, and despite that, squandered it completely. EU4. Now this is Europa Universalis 4. The game looks like this on its player count. It went up. You can see development ceased right around here, and then the game, I mean, it's like it's here. It's still got decent players and all that, right? But you can see EU4 did nothing but go up. More people wanted to play this game as it got reworked. It was a more enjoyable game and certainly a very replayable game. It struggled on release with low content. Within 1 year of development, player counts never dipped below 10,000, and within 4 years, player counts never dipped below 20,000. This game only stopped development in 2024. This game was developed for 11 years. For 11 years, the developers continued to work on and improve this game, and they only stopped because they're releasing a sequel. Hearts of Iron 4 is by far Paradox's most popular game, and I'll mention this in every video. Hearts of Iron player count looks like this. It goes up. Line go up. Hearts of Iron 4 didn't have the best release. It had 41,000, which is still a good number, and all it did is go up. There's currently a player count. The peak right now is basically its release day numbers, which is unheard of for any game. Stellaris struggled very hard on release and had entire aspects of the game redone. Despite that, it still never dipped to Victoria 3's average player count. So I would say, I forgot to show it right here, so I'm going to bring it up. I would say that Victoria 3 still, despite being a game that very much had another one of these weak releases, managed to recuperate that. And if we go back here, I want to make sure we're showing it. There we go. The launch count for Victoria 3 was 68,000, which is still less players than Victoria 3. So this is another game with less of an install base than Victoria 3 at launch that never dipped down to Victoria 3's player count, and through reworks and through content additions has slowly and gradually managed to maintain a steady player base. Imperator Rome was ditched. I'm not even going to go into it. Crusader Kings 3 struggled once again with being a content-light game on release. Has since recovered, but when both games were at their lowest player count, CK3 still had double the players. So once again, we have CK3. Now this is a game with the largest amount of players on release, and we can see the player count has never really dipped to even 15,000. It still averages right now over 20,000. The game has done nothing but improve and done well. And now let's look at Victoria 3. Player count is the lowest of all Paradox developed games outside of Imperator Rome. I'm not going to go into Imperator Rome. Victoria 3 had a massive release with 70,000 people. And this does go into... I'm trying to defend the game having a very bad release. The player count quickly got obliterated, and it sat being obliterated for a long time. In fact, we can see here that even... a year later, a year after launch, the player count was still just getting destroyed. So the game had a year of post-launch content, and it still was not doing good. Only recent expansions have managed to do decently, and even then we can see the player count is still dipping really, really, really hard. So then you might be asking, why exactly did Victoria 3 have such a weak launch? I spoke in general terms earlier, but let's start doing annoyingly great detail over why this launch was just so weak and why this game isn't replayable. Because I think, as you can see here, as I've gone over all of them in great painful detail, I'm sure to the exasperation of many people who are annoyed at me doing this, Victoria 3, despite having a great launch, Victoria 3, despite having Victoria 3, a fan favorite game, despite being so highly anticipated, and don't take my word for it, Paradox Development Studios invites you to build your ideal society in the tumult and exciting transformative 19th century. Balance the competing interests in your society and earn your place in the sun in Victoria 3, one of the most anticipated games in Paradox's history, which is true. The only game more anticipated was Crusader Kings 3, and Crusader Kings 3 more than, I think, triples Victoria 3's current player count, which is embarrassing. They really screwed up here. I don't know, that might be a bit too mean, but we can clearly see that Victoria 3 is screwed up a lot. Okay. So why is this game not replayable? What sucks about this game? The game start is absolutely terrible. Starting in 1836, the world was decided, which is true. In 1836, we can see here right at the start of the game, the world is basically decided at this point. Britain owns India. The European powers are technologically way ahead of everyone else. The European great powers are all but decided in giant power blocks, and historically, really nothing happened to change the entire world during this time period. The Qing dynasty blew up, I guess, and the Ottomans blew up, and that's like kind of it. You know, not really a lot happened. When we compare this to Crusader Kings 3 or Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron with World War II, during other time periods, a lot more things happened. This game only takes place over 100 years, and just not a lot happened. The winners were already chosen, the losers were already chosen. The large European powers will dominate the world. The smaller European powers won't get to go to war or do much of anything. And the non-European powers are so weak that their gameplay will mostly involve doing nothing ever. The developers deliberately designed the gameplay to play out as it did historically, which is to say that not much is going to happen. Other Paradox games allow you to do very many ahistorical things. In Crusader Kings, for example, you can take a tribe, a backwards tribe with no hope of doing anything for the next 1,000 years, and you can rapidly feudalize them, and you can rapidly increase their technology. You can take areas of the world that really couldn't do much, and you can rapidly make them do much. You can do the same thing in Europa Universalis. In Hearts of Iron, within the span of a decade, you can make Brazil conquer the world. changing history is a large part of these sorts of games. Despite that, the developers have painfully decided that any area of the world that isn't European kind of needs to suck to play. Now, that might be historical, but that certainly doesn't make good gameplay. And that is really big. It's 1836 and the world isn't very interesting. At this point, it's important to remember that compared to EU4 CK3, Victoria 3 moves at 4 ticks per day instead of 1. That means moving 50 years in Victoria 3 takes as much time as moving 200 years in either of those games. Now, ticks are the game's progression, so it'll be 1 tick is 1 day. Because when I unpause the game here, and you can see this, it now takes 4 ticks of time to equal a day. Do you see that? So this game is an excruciatingly slow pace if you're trying to play any area of the world that isn't in Europe. It takes so long to do anything. Okay. That means these 50 years need to have a lot happen to make it interesting. I'll go over almost everything that happened and whether or not it's simulated well in the game. So these are all the military conflicts. People do like war, people do like fighting each other. So let's see. Were the first 50 years of this game, that would be 200 years in another Paradox game, were they interesting enough to warrant these decisions, this starting date, these timetable? Were they interesting enough to do this? The short answer is no, but I'll go through all of them. There was the Egyptian-Ottoman War, where the Ottomans fought Egypt and then took back Syria. That's it. Okay. Oops, sorry, I opened my Spotify right there. The Sardinian-Piedmont-Austrian War. Can it be represented in game? And I should mention, attempts at representing the Egyptian-Ottoman War fail entirely. There's not even a slight chance of it working even the tiniest bit historically. The Sardinian-Piedmont-Austrian War is represented in game very poorly. Sardinia-Piedmont has almost zero chance of winning the war if the events in game even unfold, which they rarely do. Sardinia-Piedmont did declare war on Austria and tried to take Milan. It did fail historically, but they did have a semi-decent shot at it. They were blown out in a battle that made them eventually capitulate, but it wasn't like Austria was strong enough to invade Sardinia-Piedmont. They just held their territory. In-game, Sardinia-Piedmont is so unbelievably weaker, with only 21 battalions to Austria-Hungary's 190, that Austria has no chance of ever even being the tiniest bit threatened, which we will get into later. So this war, we're at 1839 and we're already at 1848. So already we're at the point where 12 years in game would have to pass before anything interesting historically would happen. And I assure you, this is to get a point. Nothing happened in this point in history. I mean, not literally nothing, but you know what? Let's skip all this and I'll just tell you all. I have gone painfully through this and written it all up. You can read it if you want, but basically here's what historically happened. Germany formed, Italy formed in 1870. And how much would that be? That'd be 34 years after game start. In 1870, Prussia attacked France and took Alsace-Lorraine. And that's basically it. Other than that, there was a Crimean War, which has no chance of being represented historically. The wars that did happen have a very low chance of being represented historically. And basically nothing happens. If I play a country like Belgium, the developers want the game to play historically, so if I play something like Belgium, I will be expected to do basically nothing. If I do try to go to war, it will be almost impossible. It's very difficult to change history, and you just sort of sit there and do nothing, because that's historically what happened. This start date sucks. The Balkans War, and a lot of what happens over here doesn't even happen for a good 70 years from game start. The game will be wrapping up by the time I can even start interacting with these characters. Greece will sit here and do nothing. For the most part, Italy will form, then do nothing. Germany will form, then do nothing. Nothing happens. Now that would be great. As I do go on here, the peacetime gameplay gets repetitive and old really fast. I'm not saying developers put no effort into it, but I'm saying that the vast majority of your time playing this game will be spent on staring at your screen as you speed up the game to get anything to happen. At this point, I'm just going to make a note to literally show the gameplay itself so you guys can see how compelling it is. So, with nothing happened historically, how fun is it to play your country? Playing the European majors, which I'll get into later, is boring and not really that interesting. You can maybe do 1 or 2 runs on them, but does it eventually get interesting? No. Let's swap to Dynam. Is playing a non-European country any interesting? So you can see here the Dynam AI is trying to build a fishing wharf. They can't really afford to do much else, so let's see here. Let's set up a construction sector. Oh, we can't build a construction sector here or here. we haven't invented urbanization, so we can't invent a construction sector. So actually, we would need to get to urbanization. Why do I have no technology? I think something gets screwed up here. I think I screwed something up here. Let's swap to a different country. I think my files might be corrupted. Let's swap to Persia. We can see on Persia then that Persia is trying to build an administrative sector. Let's go in here and let's build some construction sectors first off. So here is the game plan. I'm gonna build construction sectors and then let's wait. Now let's go 3 speed. Most of the time people will play games at 3 speed. This is the gameplay. This is it. This is the fun. This is it, guys. So let's go 4 speed. This is it. This is the gameplay. There's no war. There's nothing to do. I could try to pass a law. It'll fail. But you know, screw it. Let's try to become a theocracy. And then I wait on theocracy. And this is it. Yep, this is the non-European gameplay. Because you have no construction. So you can't really do anything. So this is, I'm not making this up. I'm not trying to exaggerate. I'm not trying to do anything. Like for the most part, yes, this is the gameplay. Unless you start with your construction already at 50 or 60 or 70, and you can actually start churning out buildings, this is it. This is all you do. Yep. Yep. I think one of the mods that I turned on and used, after I turned it off, it did not properly turn off. That's kind of a problem with Paradox games. I think that's what's happening right now. So you can see here, this is it. This is a gameplay. So what are you going to be doing? You're just taking the vast majority of your time on any non-European country playing at 5 speed. And then the issue, the funny thing you might be realizing here is, great, we made the gameplay super slow by spitting, each day is now 4 ticks, but now what do people do to get through that? They just play at a higher speed to get through the time faster, because this shit is boring. Oh boy. So let's go through that. It gets even worse when, remember, powers outside Europe can't really do anything at all. They'll be spending years building a few buildings with very little to do. Warfare is discouraged heavily by the AI constantly joining against you and by the very mechanics of the game. Even China becomes a complete chore to play, becoming very weak, as you'll be mostly micromanaging extremely unfun elements of the game, running the game at super high speed so you can eventually do anything. So what is the war system in this game? Let's try to show you guys, and let's see if we can actually make it interesting. Let's declare war on Herat, and this might be really funny, it might not be, because here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna tell Herat, return my state. And I'm going to force the diplomatic play, which opens a diplomatic play. Do I declare war? No, I start a diplomatic play. I'm going to add these to here. I'm going to say, Herat, I'm going to declare war on you. Let's march this army up to the border. I don't control my army. I just put it on the border, and then I watch. So we hope that no country joins against me, because actually any of these countries, Russia, Great Britain, any of them could join against me. And the second they join against me, I die. Is that fun? No, it's not fun. I assure you. A lot of people get very frustrated by the system. And here's the warfare. It's me still being on super high speed. I'm still building buildings. I'm still trying to become a theocracy. In a normal game, I wouldn't be a theocracy, but you get the idea here, right? And here's the warfare, guys. So even once you're in war, it's not terribly interesting. Is the warfare fun? Does it fulfill the promise? They did say, in some of their original dev diaries, they wanted warfare to be kind of fun, that you're managing your resources, you're trying to trade, you're trying to keep your economy going, that warfare is you and your enemy beating your economies on each other and saying, no, actually, that's not true. See, here's the thing. There's no such thing as a stockpile. You can't stockpile guns. You don't run out of guns or anything like that. You don't do anything, really. This is it. This is the warfare. So long as you have enough guns, and I believe I should. Actually, no, we don't even have enough guns. This is how little it matters. Like to be blunt, even if you're out of guns sometimes, it doesn't even matter. The system is just so bad. And this is it. This is a warfare. I put my dudes on the front, and then I go back to looking at my build queue. I'm playing at 5 speed, by the way. If I was playing in multiplayer, it would be like this. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. It gets even worse when you remember that many of the interesting conflicts in the game take place way further after the start date that you'd like. This means that developers either ahistorically make them take place sooner or leave those regions of the world being very boring. The developers have opted in large to leave those regions of the world very boring. So South America, which does in this time period have a lot of wars and a lot of things going on and some interesting stuff, by and large, South America is so laughably underpowered that when I used to host big multiplayer games, it was difficult to get anyone to even try to play in South America because a lot of their conflicts take place. There are some conflicts that take place a bit earlier in the time frame, but there are a lot of conflicts that take place like 10, 20, 30 years out. That means if I want to play as Paraguay and experience maybe the War of the Triple Alliance, I am literally sitting here on Paraguay in game. This is their actual gameplay here. I'm sitting here doing this. Once again, let's go 5 speed. This is my gameplay. Let's get some logging camps. Oh no, I'm running out of money. I'm running a deficit. My surplus money will run out. No. Okay, let's move on. I wrote a list here. Japan takes so long to do anything that it doesn't really matter. So you might think, oh man, no, Japan sucks. The Balkan states out of all the Balkan wars, nah, they suck. They're not fun at all. India sits just completely ruled by the British. They're doing a DLC to try to make India more interesting. But for the most part, if you're playing India, all you do is you sit under the British and you build. That's it. It's really not fun at all. Okay, let's just say the truth then. The only real fun gameplay is going to be playing the strong Europeans at game start, because if I tab in here, we can see France builds enough with their massive construction of 94, even though they're somehow running into debt. I'm not sure how the AI is pulling that off. France does build enough that they could actually build enough to actually continue to build their economy, which will allow them to actually adjust market goods and build stuff and have fun and ooh, interesting gameplay. So is playing as these European majors fun? I mean, surely you're saying me I'm building lots so I can make lots of decisions. I can change myself, blah, 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 blah. Well, no. Hold on here. I'm trying to remember this. Victoria 3 leaves the non-Europeans far weaker than they were in Victoria 2 because it takes 4 days instead of 1. Blah, 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 blah. Ah, here we go. Right here. This is what I said about that one. Okay. There's 2 problems. This makes the game really repetitive, as you'll have the same gameplay loop on 90% of the countries, and it won't be fun. The remaining 10% will just be the super strong Europeans. This is the obvious issue that, is it fun to start the game as a strong country? Not really. The AI in this game continues to be laughably weak, and after you become even moderately competent at playing the game, starting as one of the larger ones will allow you to completely get bored of the game very quickly. So here we can see the French AI has somehow managed to rack up a 100,000 per month deficit. They will rapidly approach bankruptcy at this point. And for what? For what did they do to get this bankruptcy? I guess they started a war with the British. Why did they start the war with the British? Because I guess the French are trying to, I don't even understand. What are you guys trying to do? You're trying to take the Madras Treaties port. So the British are trying to take a treaty port and causing both countries to explode into debt because they both conscript. Okay, you know what? Let's just phrase it. Boy, the AI in this game is really, really dumb and cannot play the game. Even to this day, I can't. Even here's me showing it to you live. I'm showing you this live. Now let's see. Can the British afford this war? They started it. And the British are also going massively into debt, and they will also die. Has their GDP been improving since the game starts, since I unpaused the game? No, it hasn't. They're losing. They're already losing the game. I unpause the game, and the AI is already dying. Wonderful. What a fun game to play. If you play as a major country, you'll be too strong, and you'll easily conquer the world. If you play as a secondary country, you're just sitting there at 5 speed doing nothing. Wow. Can multiplayer save this game? Some games are saved by very fun multiplayer. Victoria 3 seems almost designed entirely for multiplayer, so can it be fun? Well, no. First off, the developers give very little attention to multiplayer for some reason, and it is extremely unstable. Some patches are entirely unplayable in multiplayer. Most patches have no working hot join function, so if a player crashes, which they will, you have to rehost the entire game. There's no lobby system in the game. So let me try to explain this to you guys properly. When I open this game for multiplayer, there is no lobby. Normally, you would have a lobby where everyone could load in, make sure they have the same version of the save, and then you would start the game after that. In this game, there is no lobby. Everyone just hot joins in at the same time, and then you hope that the game launches. Sometimes, if some players take longer to hot join than other players, some players will have selected actions, change little bits about their country, which will cause the game to then desync. Now you can try to police everyone and you can try to get them to all not do anything, but even just the action of loading into the game can change some variables, which then means that the later players get different versions of the game, which causes a desync. This is a huge issue, and on some patches, you just literally cannot continue a save anymore. A campaign gets ended, the save is ruined, because you literally just cannot hot join people in anymore and get the game to run. There's no lobby, so you can't host the game otherwise. Additionally, because hot join is just entirely broken, you need to rehost the entire time. Anytime someone crashes or desyncs or does anything, you need to rehost the entire game. Now, I did see here that me literally just sitting here and doing absolutely nothing has caused a mod to, for some reason, bleed into my game files, which is to say this game is not the most stable. It crashes. Not all the time, but for some people more than others. I personally don't crash that often, but for some people they do. Desyncs are pretty common. As this game, you kind of have to run it at 4 speed to have an entertaining time, which causes the game to run so quickly that the game will often desync. It's just not fun. Additionally, imagine, as I said earlier, imagine you're playing one of these secondary countries like Dainam, and you have to play at 3 speed so other people can enjoy the game, but typically you try to play 4 speed. Even at 4 speed, does this seem like compelling gameplay? No. And I'm going to summarize my entire thing I wrote here. I have literally had people in our multiplayer games go and eat dinner. They queue up all the buildings, they queue up logging camps, and then they queue up, okay, well, I don't have anything here, but they'll queue up logging camps. Okay, I don't have any buildings. Wow, I literally don't have technology in that country right now. I mean, I could verify my save and get it fixed, but let's go to another crappy country, Sokoto. Sorry guys, Sokoto was pretty crappy. They're also a jihadi state, so don't think I'm being mean. So let's queue up some of this, and then what do? We're playing at 4 speed. We know this is going to take about 40 minutes to get through, so I just leave. And here would be the multiplayer game plan. I'm not even making this up. I'm not even exaggerating. People will straight up, they will just walk away from their computer. Now to be serious, now to be blunt. Does this really seem fun and compelling? It can get quite difficult to make people actually want to enjoy this game. The warfare isn't too fun. The managing your country is mostly just sitting there looking. So at the end of the day, is it really that fun? Well, not really. So once a great wars kick off, does the warfare system save the game? No, absolutely not. Wars are better than they were at launch, which is about all I can say. They have gotten multiple reworks and several attempts to fix them, none of which have improved them noticeably. It's still frequent for the warfare system to break down and have game-breaking bugs that make the player just drop the game in frustration. So, I have shown the warfare system. I did make a note of showing the warfare system, but if I go in here and I tag on Brazil, who's currently fighting their rebellions, this is the warfare system. You put your units on the front line, and you hope that you eventually win the battle. You can do generals, you can do things like that, and yes, people will say, well, it's more complicated than that, but this is like 90% of this system. Here's the problem. If I was to take, for example, this little bit of land here, you can see that these are 2 impassable areas. So it could potentially create 2 different fronts. The fronts would split. Then my armies that I put on the front will randomly decide which front they want to go to. There are multiple times where all your armies will leave one front, and that front will be unoccupied, and enemy armies will then just win battle after battle after battle against literally no one, and you can end up losing all the progress you've made over maybe an hour or 2 of gameplay in 1 second. I'm not even joking about this. This is actually a common problem still to this day. They've tried to fix it many times and they've improved the situation, but that's about it. So once again, you can see the AI put their army on the front, and that's it. That's all we do. We just watch. This is it. This is the warfare system. There's no weapon stockpiling. There's nothing. There's just nothing to do here. It's just boring. I'm sorry. So the country selection sucks, the gameplay is repetitive, multiplayer is awful, but all Paradox games get better at launch, right? Through reworks, content additions, and expansions, the game will gradually improve and be better, right? Victoria 3 had very weak post-launch support. To defend this, I will literally just make a note, again, to go over every bit of content after launch. Then we can end this. So, let's go over this now. We've seen that the base game isn't very good, and really hasn't changed since launch. So, did the content do anything? Has it added lots of content to the game? Is everyone more fun now? Well, no. See, the very first content they added into the game was Voices of the People. You know what Voices of the People did? It added content to France. So, France. I'm not saying France isn't a very important country at this time period, but we've gone over why playing as one of these large major countries is just really boring. You quickly obliterate the AI, and the only thing left to do is just conquer the world. In a game that punishes warfare so heavily, all you can do is just go try to conquer the world. The warfare isn't interesting, and you're supposed to be managing and building and gardening your country, and all you can do is conquer the world. So we added content for a country that you cannot play through because it's boring. That was it. Okay, so what did we do after that? We added Colossus of the South. We added more content for South America. For the most part, all the content did was nerf the ever-living crap out of South America and make it extremely boring, and that's it. That's about all they did. The expansion kind of sucked. I'm going to be real with you. The expansion kind of sucked, and the South America DLC was awful. I really don't know what to say. It was just really bad. No one wants to play in South America, and even fewer people want to play in South America now because it was a content update for a region, and basically all they did was make it more miserable to play. So then we have Sphere of Influence. Did Sphere of Influence do much to make the game more interesting? Kind of. Coming in at $30, so we're asking for $30 for an expansion already. It added some content to Persia, and actually the content was pretty good. It allows Persia to get a bit stronger, and potentially be actually a playable nation that could be fun. Maybe not at game start, but if you're willing to just look at your computer screen for 2 hours, it'll start eventually getting fun. They can get buffs, they can get strong, they can do some cool stuff. What else did Sphere of Influence do? Well, it added the sphere system, the power block system, which was just a form of giga power creep where all you do is stack buffs. No, I'm not even joking. That's like it. It's like 90% of the system is just stacking buffs on your country. It really doesn't do much else. It's also horribly imbalanced multiplayer because if you don't join someone's power block, that means you don't have their buffs. Which has the unfortunate reality of meaning you'll fall off so hard because if you're not buffing your country with up to 4 different buffs, then you just fall off. So it means everyone has to join someone's power block, which kind of goes against the idea of the power blocks. The power block system is supposed to be that a country kind of like soft owns you once you're in their power block, but there's literally no downside to joining someone's power block for the most part, and everyone needs to do it, which kind of breaks multiplayer because you end up with the super majors being even stronger because now they have these massive power blocks. And I'm not even joking, that was it. That's been all the post content. I mean, they had a train pack. I'll be real, like memes aside, I do like seeing the trains and seeing the different types of trains. I do like seeing them choo-choo. They choo-choo through the ground. They like, you know, it's cool. They don't actually impact the gameplay at all, but you see them choo-chooing after you like, you know, you build railways and stuff, and then you can see your trains like, they don't actually deliver coal, but you can see them going from like a coal mine to your city, and you're like, it's so cool. And so this is probably the best DLC. And I'm not even trying to like exaggerate or like do a joke. I'm not even trying to be like mean or anything. I think literally their DLC, which I like the most, is the free trains DLC. Because I just like seeing the choo-choos on the map. I'm a simple man, okay? You put choo-choos on the map, I like it. Can I show you guys the choo-choos? France starts with choo-choos at game start. Let me see if I can actually show you. Can I actually show you guys the choo-choos? Are there any choo-choos on the game yet? I think oh no, it's a cart. Oh, Oh, there's an early choo-choo. Look at it. It is just choo-choo, choo-choo. It's carrying lumber. Look at that. It's amazing, right? This is literally the most compelling gameplay this game has. This is literally the most fun you'll have with this game. Choo-choo. Look at it. Choo-choo. Yeah. So anyway, why maybe is this game not as popular as it should be? Why does its player count look like this when every other player count for Paradox games looks like this? I mean, Stellaris goes up and down, but you can see it mostly goes up, right? Even Crusader Kings 3 is mostly going up, even though it's kind of hard to tell, right? But then you got Victoria 3, which is like, it went from like literal unplayable garbage to playable garbage to everyone's kind of realizing the game is still garbage. And that's it. That's the game. That's Victoria 3. That's why it sucked. So thank you all for watching me kind of just go on this long rant. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.